And now it's time for a Geek Speak with
GK Technologies.
Sarah and Jody.
In the fields again. I just can't wait to get in the fields again. The life I love is spreading potash for my friends, and I can't wait to get in the fields again. No, I can't wait to get in the fields again.
All right, so welcome back to the second part of our conversation with GK's very own Clint Streeter. So, Clint, so glad that you can join us again today. It was super interesting visiting with you last time about kind of how you came to work with GK Technology. And I think where we left off was about where you got hired on full-time with Darren and Kelly. So when you first came to be a full-time employee at GK Technology, what did you do?
Well, I was primarily learning from Kelly how to make zones, and that's pretty much where he started me out at. So I, like probably every new employee, I spent a few weeks at the farmstead with Kelly, learning how to do at his office there, learning how to make zones and things like that. And I still remember looking at, he was showing me, okay, why this image looks better than this, and this one's no good, and because of this and that, and he's pointing out all these details in the image itself of the field, and half of them I can't really see. They're so subtle, but you look at images enough, you see tons of variation in the field and things like that. So I was like, I don't know, man, I don't know how this is gonna work, because it's gonna take me forever to figure this out. And like really anything, the more you do it, you kind of start figuring things out and finding better ways of doing it. And so it just sent me a lot of stuff to take, and make zones with and for different people. And I think the way that our software makes zones too helps quite a bit, so that you're getting more averages in certain areas rather than just taking one image and making zones. So it kind of, in a way, is more forgiving, I guess, if you want to say.
Well, and I think you bring up a really important point for anybody who's really getting into making good zones. It is a lot about practicing how you look at a field so that you understand where the variability is, and understanding and practicing how you can bring out those different areas of variability across a field. And I think it's a really important thing to point out that, especially maybe for first-time listeners, the way our software from GK Technology works is very different from how software works from other companies. You certainly can make zones from one image. However, that is not how we make zones at all. As a matter of fact, we allow people to put together multiple images. Hopefully, we are predicting, how's this for an oxymoron, guys? We're predicting the consistent variability of a field, so that year in and year out, where that variability is occurring in the field, hopefully we're really bringing that out so it's stable. But we really do allow users to incorporate multiple images over multiple years. So you get to have a really good idea of how that field is shaping up. And then once you make those zones, you can change them further from there on out, so that you have some flexibility to really get those zones honed in. And, quite frankly, Clint, there are definitely some tricks and tips that I picked up working with you when I first came to GK Technology. And so I think when we all first come to work at GK Technology, we have that learning curve where we first get here and everything feels brand new, even for a seasoned software user. And so I think we all go through that time. But certainly, maybe you went through that time at GK Tech at the beginning of your career. You certainly are an expert on making zones at this point in time. So it is really great that you took all that time earlier on to figure out how those images worked and all of those things. At least what I'm doing for my customers has certainly benefited from your time, because I've
Yeah.
tried to glean that information from you.
Yeah, and when I first started, it was, pretty much just Landsat and then the county NAIPs that we were using because Sentinel wasn't around yet. And so going back and looking at old zones that I've made, I mean, it's like you look at them and like, oh, I can get way more detail in there than that. There's some that are just not much detail at all, and primarily just because of the Landsat images that we used, and it was tough to get, really good images with the resolution that they are. But
Can you talk a little bit more about that? Maybe just some of the difference between, okay, when we talk about county images, we're referring to like NAIP imagery. And then now we're talking about Landsat and Sentinel. Do you want to talk about what each of those are and kind of the timeline of like when those came out and what some of the differences between those are?
yeah, the NAIPS, the National Ag Imagery Program is what NAIP stands for. With we get those from the NRCS website, but there are a lot of the background maps for FSA maps that you'll see, and they fly. Well, luckily we've been getting North Dakota flown every year since, I don't know, like 2012 or something, or no, it'd be later than that. It'd be 2016, 2018, somewhere in there.
These really are the pictures that farmers use to certify their crops at the FSA office every year. And they're just geo-referenced, and so that we can bring them into our software systems. Is that correct?
Yeah, you probably know more about that side of it, I guess, than I would for the actual grower side of it. But yeah, and they started doing that. I think 2012 is as far back as I've seen for images for that. They don't fly every state every year, but they do all 50 states, I believe, at some point. And I think the resolution for the earlier ones was 2 meter, somewhere in there, and then now they've gotten down to the ones last year, I think, were, I don't know, 0.2 meter, 0.4 meter. I don't remember what they were.
Minnesota's data set was huge last year.
Yeah. So they're even higher resolution than the 0.6 that they were in 2022, 2021, somewhere there. So you're looking at 60 centimeters a pixel
Wow.
that they're covering. So, I mean, it's nice that way. And then they've been consistently covering the color infrared, or having the near infrared band in there too, to get color infrared images from them as well, which is a huge resource for getting NDVI and a lot of those different indices.
And those are all done from an airplane, correct? These aren't satellite images. They're all airplane flown.
Correct. Yeah. So they're all aerial images, and they're probably going to be one of the bigger planes, bigger cameras. I can't remember the company that builds those great big cameras, but yeah. And then you go from there to the Landsat that we had, and that stuff goes back to 84, and we even have some of that in our imagery library. But and over multiple satellites, they had Landsat 5 and then 7, which is the one that has the
lines in it.
it doesn't collect real well in the center of the images, so there's missing pixels and stuff. They never were able to correct that, but and then you've got 8 and 9 now that just went up. They're pretty much the same exact. I think 9 is the same as 8, but
When did 9 start flying?
it's been a year or two ago, I think, I think that's when they changed the website for the USGS because of Landsat 9, where they were going to a different bit depth or something with the images.
And is that like a United States satellite program just to collect images around the world?
Yeah, it's US based, a lot like Sentinel, only Sentinel's European, but yeah, it's just a sun synchronous satellite that collects data over the same, every 16 days. It passes over the exact same point in the world, I guess, the globe.
Doesn't it gather at the same time of the day too?
Yeah, I think that's part of the sun synchronous part. I don't know. I don't know a lot about that, or forgotten a lot of that stuff since I haven't been dealing with it. But I know at one time I found a website where you could see real time the images being collected as it passed over the globe, so you could see it. And I don't remember if there's a lot of different methods of collecting the image, whether it's push broom or which is just basically it collects the pixels as it flies over the Earth, or line scanning, where it just makes lines and builds those into a image.
I genuinely don't know how this works. So when a satellite is flying over and gathering imagery, there's different ways. Essentially, it's not like it's just taking a picture, but there's different ways that there's different methods of actually pixelizing what it quote unquote is seeing below.
Right. Yeah. So it's not a snapshot and then you fly a little bit further and take another snapshot and fly a little further. I mean, that's how I was doing it with aerial imagery, but with the satellites, and there's different methods of ways that the different satellites do it. But yeah, like I say, with the push broom, where it's just like you're pushing a broom and it's taking a picture as it flies along in one long continuous picture, and then they chunk it up into different images from there.
I'm sorry. I've got like a spinning circle right now over my face. I'm just like processing. Because like, intuitively, right? You think about like aerial imagery and you kind of get like the idea of like a camera outside of a plane. But then, yeah, I've never thought of, I know that satellite imagery exists and I use it, but I never thought about how that actually like happens to collect that data. And now I'm just like, my mind's wrapping around it and it's wild.
Yeah.
So what was the other method? There was a push broom method, and what was the other one?
Line scan, I think, is one of them. There are 3 or 4 it seems like I've seen, but line scan is where it just builds a line of pixels as it goes, like you're scanning back and forth. And so it just builds that line of pixels continuously into an image.
So it's like taking a laser and like instead of burning something into something, like the lines going up and down and it's creating those pixels on how it's collecting data up and down so that finally you get like the whole map of the area that it's taking a picture of.
Yeah, for the width that it collects. So like painting, yeah, basically you're just moving your brush up and down and working your way across the wall type of thing.
That is so cool.
But
I always did think that it was interesting that Landsat took pictures at the same time of the day, because the way the sunlight and the sun synchronous thing that you're talking about right there, the way the sunlight hits the ground can certainly affect how we are taking a look at the crops, whether you're seeing that image taken in the morning or in the middle of the day or at night. The sun is going to be at a different angle and it's going to catch the plant canopy differently in agriculture. So the fact that Landsat is taken at the same time of the day, that just blows my mind.
yeah, and I mean, ideally, straight up or nadir is what they call it, would be the ideal angle, which would be, straight, I don't know, 90 degrees to the surface. And so, yeah, being able to do that consistently, and you'll see a lot in the NAIPs, where you'll see some of the fall ones where the tree rows have these long shadows out into the field, which don't help much because when you try to use them for zones and things like that, it really affects it. But essentially that's what you're dealing with is trying to eliminate those shadows to where you're minimizing them as much as possible. And the satellite, I mean, I'd like to know the guy that did the math, or the gal that figured that out to when exactly it had to fly over. And I think part of the sun synchronous part too is that it's constantly passing over during daylight hours. So the globe is basically, I don't know, in a way spinning underneath of it, and it's staying in the area that's at the optimal time of day as it passes over.
So that satellite doesn't move a whole lot then. It's not like actually orbiting the planet.
Well, it is, but yeah, I don't know. That's where the aerospace part is where I don't that's not very well.
Right, because like it has to be in orbit, right? And it has to make sure
Yeah.
that it's always in front of this, like having that optimum daylight time. And like in the previous podcast, you mentioned like your optimum time was from like 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. for that sunlight. So I assume like that's probably similar for the satellite imagery too, is like high noon wherever that satellite is. And then
Yeah,
you're covering is it the whole globe that they cover, or is it only like land-based areas that they cover?
I think Landsat covers
Inch of the globe.
everything, oceans and everything. I don't know about Sentinel.
We would want Big Brother to know what's going on in the ocean.
Everywhere except for what is it, Area 51?
Area 51. True story. Kelly has told us that in Area 51, you cannot get satellite imagery for that area.
Oh, yeah.
That it's an area that there's no data for Area 51. Sorry, everybody. Do.
Okay, so you just mentioned Sentinel 2, and we've talked a little bit about like Landsat being a little bit different than Sentinel. What are some of those differences? Of course, like there's that resolution difference, right? Like I think most of us, if we're trying to make maps, we're probably going to go look at Sentinel data where before we start looking at Landsat data.
Well, okay, let's back up for a second. What is resolution?
Yeah.
And what is the resolution difference between Sentinel and Landsat? Can you help us out with that, Clint?
So the best way to describe it, I think, is resolution is basically the size of each pixel that it covers on the ground. So in an image, if you zoom way in, you start seeing the pixels, of course. And for Landsat, it's 30 meters. So each pixel in that image represents a 30-meter square on the ground, and that would be a resolution. Sentinel is 10 meter, so every pixel represents 10-meter square that's on the ground. So obviously it's higher resolution and shows more detail because each area it represents is smaller in each one of those pixels, and so you can get more detail into it. And then you get to the NAIPs where it's even higher, and you start seeing a lot more of the tracks of the sprayer and different things in the field, or even the rows and things like that.
And I realize we haven't talked about Sentinel yet. We got to get there, but since we're on the topic of resolution in our winding conversation, help me understand how the image resolution affects the amount of data in an image.
Well, the higher the resolution, the more finer detail you get, the more file space it's going to take up, or the size of the image, I guess, in a way. And that's some of the problem with drone imagery, is that such high resolution. It's sub-meter resolution, to where the file sizes are much bigger and cover a smaller area just to get to the file size that we can handle. But so yeah, the higher resolution, of course, the higher. I mean, either they reduce the size of the footprint of each image, or they reduce the resolution to try to, if they're trying to stay within a certain limit of file size and that type of thing.
Oh, I suppose it'd be like resolution, thinking about what kind of picture you can get with an old flip phone from like 2007 versus like the and that flip phone would have a really low resolution picture, not that big in file size, really grainy, compared to like what you can take with an iPhone today, really high resolution photo.
Yeah.
So what is Sentinel data then?
So Sentinel is a European satellite, and they put up a number of satellites that are all Sentinel. There's Sentinel 1, Sentinel 2, Sentinel 3, Sentinel 4, Sentinel 5. I don't know how high up they got, but they ended up actually putting 2 Sentinel imagery satellites in there, 2 Sentinel 2 satellites that are on the same orbit, but they cross at different times, so that one's kind of following the other around the globe, taking pictures of the same areas, which has drastically increased the overpass times, to where with Landsat it was every 16 days, because they just had one satellite orbiting. And I don't know how that works with 9 now, if they did something similar with that, or if it's different. But so we have Sentinel 2A and B satellites, and that's depending on where you're at in that overpass area that they're collecting for imagery. You could have a 2-day gap to a 5-day gap between them, but I think it's at least every 5 days, if I remember right, between images. So in season imagery is really improved for trying to predict or keep an eye on different stuff in crops. At one point, they were talking of having 4 of them, and I don't know if where that's at. I haven't heard any more about it, or they're happy with the 2 that they've got, but it's satisfying the needs of what people are using it for.
It is pretty amazing just the volume of data and the volume of images that's coming out of the Sentinel satellites. There's a pile of it.
Yeah.
It sure feels like before they started flying, when we were trying to make zones from imagery, you might get 1 or 2 images for the whole season from the Landsat just because of the frequency of how often they were flying and when clouds might affect your images. You just wouldn't get that volume of good images, but just simply because of the frequency of the Sentinel data or Sentinel satellites, it just seems like we've got a higher frequency of data and we're able to find more good data out there.
Yeah, and with Landsat, certainly there's times you couldn't find an image for the entire year. You didn't have anything to represent that year, unless you were really stretching the limits of what you were willing to use for your zones. But at least there were enough years that you could go back as far as you wanted, and and try to find more images to represent that field or that match the characteristics of the field. So you had that ability at least too. And now that Sentinel's been around since 2015, 2016, we're getting to where we can go back almost 10 years in data with that and see, how a field has changed or any other things that might affect the production of it.
Do we pay for Sentinel data? How is that European? Like, do they give that to everybody? How does that come through?
I think they pretty much followed kind of the same model that with Landsat that the US did. It's completely free. They make it readily available for people to go on and download. They recently changed their website for downloading a year ago or so. So they have definitely a different way of organizing stuff. You go to Google Copernicus and you'll get a lot of different websites that have nothing to do with what you're looking for, but in a roundabout way it is, but it's can be a struggle to find exactly what you're looking for. But yeah, just and pretty much all the stuff that we use certainly is free information that you can download off the internet for making your zones, or a lot of different things.
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing to bring up actually, is the fact that okay, so we've talked about Landsat, we've talked about NAIP, and we've talked about Sentinel. And all 3 of those sources are free imagery sources. Anybody can go in and download free imagery and make their own libraries if they want to. Isn't that correct, Clint?
Yep. Yeah, and we have a lot of stuff on our website to show how to do it, or all of us are more than willing to show people if they call us and want to know about it. But yeah, it's surprising the fact that it's free on top of it. They did talk about charging for Landsat at one point, and I think they've found through a lot of the stuff, through the imagery, the LiDAR, all this stuff that states and the nations are doing, how much income it generates just based on, in a single image that we can download and create a map from, and for a business of ourselves, making our own income, or for someone else to use to make income off of, or things like that. I can't even imagine how much money they're generating just economy wise, just from a single image that their satellite's taking.
Well, and I think that's really important. And we have actually one of the things that you kind of help GK with is sort of manage the actual imagery library and the data that's going on to our servers that people can use readily. So if you get the consultants package with GK technology and our ADMS software, you have access to our servers. And in our servers, we've got a very robust library of Landsat, Sentinel, LiDAR data for elevation as well. And we haven't even talked about downloading that yet, but that's a whole nother piece, as well as NAIP imagery. How big is that data set that we've got in there? Because you've had a lot to do with managing that server library, haven't you, Clint?
Yeah, for the most part, a lot of it's trying to plan on what areas we're going to try to cover each year. Because we go from northern Alberta all the way to parts of Ontario, southern Ontario, and we don't do much in BC, but Saskatchewan and Manitoba for sure, Alberta. And then we go all as far south as Texas and Louisiana and stuff like that. There's a few states kind of on the West Coast that we don't cover so much. There's times we've covered it in years, and then primarily trying to meet the needs of consultants that have packages with us that need are paying for the imagery is one of the benefits of it. And so trying to keep them in current imagery. And so it changes a little bit from year to year. And lately we've been gaining size because of more stuff back east that we've had people have shown interest in. So I pretty much try to figure that out. And over the years, I've tried to figure out different ways of planning it to where, we start in March and we go through October for downloading images. And some of it, we'll start downloading in March, but we'll go as far back as April. And I know there's parts of the country that we've even, not too many of them, but you could probably, like out in California or some of the states that are constantly rotating crops through, that you could have imagery year round, and which California isn't bad because there's hardly a cloudy image in a lot of that stuff anyways, so I don't mind doing that. But
Sunny
but
California.
it means that many more images, and every one of those adds up. I think right now, I looked this morning and we're at around 120 terabytes of imagery that we've got on our server.
120 terabytes.
Yeah, and we add, I don't know what we add, probably 20 terabytes a season, a year to it. Could be more than that too. I don't know. I know it's a lot.
It's a really impressive library. Do you know all of the states? I know you mentioned some Canadian provinces. Do you know the states where we've got imagery right now?
I don't know the exact. I know I looked and saw the number of them. I know we got, how many? 37 states that are covered by Sentinel, I think, or by county data, I guess it is.
Oh, okay.
Wow,
that's a lot. We've got 37 states.
Pretty much, yeah. If we've got states with county data, we're probably collecting Sentinel data for them too.
And would it be as easy, like, say, if somebody's like, hey, I'm a consultant up in Alaska and I want some satellite imagery, they could just ask us and we could start building a library for them if the data is available, correct?
Yeah, and it would be available. Yeah, and we've done it in the past, and that's some of the reason for our expansion of the areas that we cover is people are taking interest in it and wanting it. And so, yeah, if we have to, if it's a Sentinel tile that we don't have, we'll either download all the way back to 2016 or fill in where we don't have imagery for it. So a lot of it is on-demand kind of stuff too, to a certain extent. It takes time to download all this stuff, certainly. So it's not instantaneous, but we'll do it.
And space.
Yeah, we have a whole server room here at our office, and I just laugh even to this day because Kelly has a copy of the server at his place, and Darren and Cheryl used to have a copy at their house, and that's where the servers would be. And you go into that server room and that thing is sitting there humming. And I'm just thinking to myself, Cheryl, God bless her heart, she had that server in her basement cranking out all that noise. Can you imagine having people over for like Thanksgiving and don't mind the hum? That's just our servers. God bless her. But I do think it's really important because, years ago when I was first using GK technology as an independent crop consultant, we didn't have access to the servers for the imagery like we do now. And I can remember when Kelly called up and we were just, Kelly and I kind of knew each other, and we were just talking about a couple things, and he talked about how he was going to, or how the imagery was now available on this server, and as long as you just paid for the consultants package, you could get access to it. And I thought for 2 seconds about how much time it took to like download one satellite image. And I said, sign me up and send me a bill. Preach on, brother. This is amazing. And it is. And it's amazing to think that when you go into that server library, I can literally look for fields that I know extremely well and look at satellite imagery from 1984. It's amazing. Just the volume and the depth and the breadth of what's in there.
Yeah, we cover a lot of area, and certainly with, if you're a smaller, I guess, operator, or maybe your area you cover is all your fields are within one county or a couple counties or something, downloading your own imagery every year wouldn't be a huge ordeal. Certainly for consultants, you talk to some of them and they've got stuff in different states and depending on where they live and cover huge areas, and to try to manage and download that volume of stuff to keep up to date on stuff is time consuming, to say the least. I mean, I was sitting here thinking how much time we would have spent even in the summer, and now I don't do it a lot. Kendra does most of it, if not all of it, for the most part. And I mean, it's every day you're getting on there and downloading 300 images, 500 images, depending on the size of the area you're trying to cover. And that's from northern Alberta to Texas at this time of year, or once you get into June, July.
I mean, that's the cool thing about having you and Kendra too, is that the data is downloaded into ADMS, into the servers for folks to access that have the consultants package. They can see those images, as soon as we download them and get them onto the server. So folks can have, I mean, it's not instantaneous, right? Like we're probably not going to have imagery from yesterday on the servers yet, but we do get that up very quickly so that you can start to look at your images.
Thank you, Kendra.
Yeah.
Paul Fuller's wife, Kendra, helps us a lot in the background to make that go. She really does deserve a shout out. She's pretty amazing at what she does.
Yeah, she helps me quite a bit. But yeah, it's like its own conversation just about it, just what we use it for and the things we can use it for, and it's only getting bigger. It's never going to get smaller. So
No. So 120 terabytes of data.
Darren's probably getting tired of ordering hard drives by now.
He's got it down. He'll just keep
Every time he turns around, he got to buy more hard drives.
Oh God, I love it. Well, it's a super fascinating thing to think about.
Is there, so thinking about the time that we've got together, is there anything else that you wanted to talk to us about today, or anything else that, in your GK experience really excites you that you haven't had a chance to talk about so far on this conversation?
I don't know. I usually don't get too excited about much. Yeah, I don't know. It's a great place to work, and we're constantly learning stuff, which is kind of inevitable anyways, with technology and different stuff, and trying to be the best kind of source we can to people that call us and wanting to know or troubleshoot stuff. I mean, this time of year, we're all doing it at pretty much a daily basis. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's something different every day, and you're problem solving constantly, it seems like, and hoping to give somebody a good set of zones to get them on the right track to really build in their production and their program and stuff, and increasing yields, hopefully, is the goal. So
I just got to say, when we use all of the imagery and putting stuff together and making a good set of zones, and you get it to that agronomist or you get it to that farmer, and they're like, wow, these are amazing. These zones nail it. There is nothing like that in the world. It's pretty cool, because it really is the place where, almost science and art meet each other together because you're really trying to describe what's going on with the crop production and you're trying to use imagery to make it happen and all of the sciencey stuff and geeky stuff that we've talked about in the past 2 episodes with you. So it's just so interesting and so rewarding when that zone comes back and they're like nailed it.
Yeah, and something I was going to mention earlier too is that, at least for me, if not 100%, a good, pretty dang close percentage are fields I've never seen before that I'm zoning. You know, I do a lot of work out in Washington State and in the western area of the country, and then North Dakota, South Dakota, all over. And so, being able to make a good set of zones that they can take to the field and ground truth and drive it and see how stuff lines up is, well, to me, it's amazing too. I don't get calls saying it's, the hilltops don't, the red zones on the hilltops don't really match or this or that. Or once in a while you'll get something, but it's usually a anomaly or something, where it's a weed patch or it's something different that is there for different circumstances. But just being able to do that and not see the field, and LiDAR's helped a lot with that too, to be able to get a feel for what the field looks like. And being in North Dakota and mapping in Washington where there's more than 5 feet of elevation change in the field, if you're in the valley or something, the Red River Valley, but compared to Palouse, it's a lot of fun. It's a little bit easier in a way because you've got so much contrast between the high elevation and low elevation in production that it really comes out in the images too, to see it.
But I think you did bring up a really important point about trying to create zones for a field that you've never seen. Before I came to work for GK Technology as an independent crop consultant, and so I mapped mostly fields that I had actually spent time crop consulting in. And I can remember being pretty nervous about making zones for fields that I had never seen before. And yet it seems to me like there's ways that between the NAIP imagery and the Sentinel imagery and the LiDAR, which is elevation data, topography data, and these different imagery sources, that you can look at the field and get an idea of where things are happening, and even to a certain extent why they're happening because of just background and training yourself how to look at those pictures. And so with that knowledge and then knowing how to put together imagery data and really process that out well, it is amazing what we can do.
Yeah, I've got a few guys that have, they'll be driving around the field soil sampling and they'll pull into a red zone or something, and like, this doesn't look right. Why would this be red? And they pull a sample and it's sandy or rocky, and they're like, oh, that's why it's a red zone, And to hear that, kind of confirms that stuff is where it should be, and it's producing the way it is for a reason, and so that's always good to hear too, I guess.
That's really fun. Last fall, I had an agronomist that I was working with making zones, and he would send me pictures every now and again out soil sampling, and he'd be like, look, it's the mod zone. And he'd take a picture of his salinity area or the droughty hilltop, whatever I had modded out on that one for him. And it was so obvious that it was so different from the rest of the field. Or he, wandered down into the red zone that was, some kind of muddy slough hole. And he's like, I don't even know if I can drive in here because it was so wet. And just to have it pegged that well, it was really rewarding.
Yeah.
It's amazing what we can do. Just like Clint mentioned before, right? When they're talking about how much economic or money is made just based off of satellite imagery, we can really take these images, make them into useful and powerful maps, and help farmers get more ROI on their acres at the end of the day. But this was a fantastic conversation with Clint today. Not only this part of the episode, but the previous episode too. It has been such a pleasure learning about your background, learning more about satellite imagery versus aerial imagery.
Totally geeking out about imagery with you.
Geeking out about imagery. So thank you so much, Clint, for your time and for the time you spend here at GK and for your knowledge and your insight.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
But with that, thank you guys so much for listening, and we will catch you next time on Ag Geek Speak from GK Technology, where we have
A map.
and an app for that.
No, I can't wait to get in the fields again.
Let the geeks at GK Technology help you with your agricultural data. Their agronomists know agriculture. When it comes to creating soils and zone maps to maximize yields in your fields, you can trust the people with decades of experience in site-specific agriculture. Everyone at GK Technology has a background in agriculture, so they know what makes a farm run, and they speak your language. The geeks at GK Technology have a map and an app for that.